Welcome to the Know. I'm Ashely Jenkins.
And I'm Ellis.
The movie that nearly broke the internet is almost here. The Ghostbusters reboot launches this weekend at the box office, and the reviews are finally in, so now we can ask the important question, the really big question, is it good or does it actually suck?
Which means we can put months of bickering, hitting the dislike button, and listening to people white knight the movie all over social media behind us.
Although, let's be honest, your mind is probably already made up about whether or not you're gonna see it anyway, because that's kind of what that trailer did. It helped you make a decision.
Either way, we can see what critics have to say, and you can rejoice in having your opinions validated or get mad about reviewer bias.
Who paid you? Before we get started, we are just looking at reviews of Ghostbusters from a variety of sources, not passing judgment on the film ourselves, although I did get to go to the premiere, so I can share a little bit, but first of all, let's look at the actual reviews from like professionals, so bring you a sampling of what all the pros say so you can get the lay of the land.
So far, the lay of the land says, well, the movie's not bad, and that hasn't erased anyone's childhood either.
Your childhood is still there. You grew up.
The general consensus is that it's funny enough, but it could have been funnier, and that it's at the very least better than Ghostbusters 2, which isn't a high bar to clear.
Well, so you got that going for you. Ghostbusters is currently sporting a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes amongst reviewers, although that number is closer to 50% for top critics. Meanwhile, it's hanging out at around 64% on Metacritic, which is somewhere in the 3 out of 5 stars range. It's respectable enough for a summer popcorn flick.
And then there's IMDb, where it's at a 3.8 out of 10 from a ton of people who've never even seen the movie. Hey, it's a data point, so we're presenting it.
But look, that's not too surprising considering that some users have been brigading to remove good reviews on the Ghostbusters subreddit. Let's just say people have a vested interest in this movie being good or bad, depending on what side of this apparent war you're on.
As for how those ratings compare to past Ghostbuster films, looking at the aggregates for classic movies is always a bit spotty, but just for fun, the original 1984's Ghostbusters is at a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 67% on Metacritic.
It's a classic. Meanwhile, Ghostbusters 2 is at 50% on Rotten Tomatoes and 56% on Metacritic.
Compared to director Paul Feig's other cinematic outings, the 78% of Ghostbusters isn't as strong as Spy's 94% and Bridesmaids 90%, although it is better than Heat's 65%, all starring most of the same people.
Paul Feig does like to work with a lot of the same people. Also, I agree with that ranking. After pouring through the top reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics are generally pretty evenly split, as we mentioned earlier.
As far as the positives for the new Ghostbusters go, some reviewers say the new cast is very funny and the comedy is equally balanced among them. They also say it pays homage to the original, with lots of meta humor and references.
However, just as many top critics say that Ghostbusters plays it a little bit too safe and sticks too closely to the original. Plus, reviewers also criticize it for not having enough laughs, that nobody stands out as a clear lead, and that there isn't enough chemistry with the new cast.
In general, it was just about impossible to find reviews that were able to ignore the controversy or that didn't have a clear angle one way or the other about the movie.
The New York Times review, for instance, is titled, "Girls Rule, Women Are Funny, Get Over It."
They said of the movie, it's at once satisfyingly familiar and satisfyingly different, kind of like a new production of Macbeth or Christopher Nolan rethink of Batman. As it turns out, the original Ghostbusters is one of those durable pop entertainments that can support the weight of not only a lesser follow-up, the 1989 sequel Ghostbusters 2, but also a gender redo.
In its review, The Wrap agrees that the movie stands up as a worthy successor to the franchise, writing, "Whether the reboot's mix of diverting newness and nostalgia to a respect makes for another zeitgeisty hit remains to be seen."
The review goes on to say, it's understandable that this franchise relaunch would want to remind you of the original, but there's no getting around that this new A-team of Ghostbusters are fresh and funny enough to have earned the space in the summer comedy firmament.
And for every glowing review, there are just as many saying the exact opposite. In particular, Entertainment Weekly says it's just not all that funny, which is kind of an important aspect for comedy.
Their review states, after a year and a half of noxious hot air, Feig's comedy is finally here, and it's time to ask the only question that should have been posed in the first place. Is the new Ghostbusters funny? The answer is kind of, but not nearly to the degree it should be considering the talent involved.
I know some kind of funny guys that would say that's perfectly good enough. The reviewer also expands a little bit on the idea that maybe the movie sticks just a little bit too close to the original, making it feel hardly fresh at all, which was a chief complaint from many of the film's detractors.
Variety's review hits the same note, saying that Ghostbusters suffers from a disappointingly strong case of deja vu.
It also criticizes the film's ghosts for being kind of lame and uninspiring, saying those that do appear make little sense, including a winged dragon creature that crashes a heavy metal concert and a Godzilla-scale anthropomorphic version of the animated series logo.
The Hollywood Reporter's review hits some similar notes, writing, short on both humor and tension. The spook encounters are rote collisions with vaporous CG specters that escalate into an uninvolving supernatural cataclysm unleashed upon New York's Times Square. It's all busyness, noise, and chaos with zero thrills and very little sustainable comic buoyancy.
They also call out the chemistry of the cast as well as the film's writing, calling it, quote, uninspired and, quote, witless.
Ouch! Of course, the big question here is whether or not the film will do well commercially. Not just because of the controversy and the discussion around the film, but because the public in general is sort of fickle when it comes to reboots.
But also because of the whole controversy. For every Force Awakens and Jurassic World home run, you're also going to get Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows or an Independence Day resurgence, neither of which did quite as well as people hoped at the box office.
Plus, the film's trailer didn't do it a ton of service either. In general, they're pretty tame and weren't helped at all by the disliking. However, that will probably have less to do with how the movie ultimately performs by the time it all is said and done.
As of the movie's most recent box office projections, it's only predicted to do around 40 or 50 million in its opening weekend. That's not bad at all for a comedy, but it's also nothing spectacular considering the movie has a $150 million budget and, well, you kind of want to do more than break even, right?
However, the positive reviews may inch that number up and surprise everyone.
After all this squabbling over the movie's controversial gender swap, we may have ended up with a decently funny movie that may or may not stand the test of time or even get a sequel, which, that's most comedies, right?
So not the apocalypse that some predicted, and maybe not the funniest movie ever that others hoped for.
The internet kind of overreacted to something? Well, that's a shocker.
What do you guys think of the early reviews of Ghostbusters? Let us know in the comments.
And for future roundups for all the movies you'd love to hate, like this video and subscribe to the Know. Okay, so I saw the movie. Have to agree with a lot of the criticisms. It's funny. It's a perfectly good Ghostbusters movie. It is a full-on reboot, like the trailers that made it sound like it was maybe kind of a sequel. Nah, it's a full reboot. I thought all the women were funny. Agree that the chemistry could have been a little bit better. But the weird thing to me was I feel like they shoved in a bunch of stuff that was like making fun of Haiti internet comments, and I was like, the only reason this is in the movie is because people didn't like the trailer and the director threw a tantrum.
Was the whole Chris Hemsworth nerdiness as gross as it was in the
awful.
trailer?
He's not even a character. He's just a caricature of dumb man.